Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we will be discussing what is the modern miracle, which is the State of Israel, as we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, as Israel approaches her 65th birthday. We'll be discussing some of the most amazing achievements that Israel's achieved in a short period of history, including facing 5 major wars for her survival, in which Israel's come out on top. And Israel now is currently leading the way in terms of science and technology, and it's an incredible blessing to the world. So we'll be asking, what does the future hold for Israel, and what are the challenges facing Israel in the years to come? I'm joined today by Keith Fraser, who's spokesperson for the Zionist Federation, and Jeffrey Smith, from former director of Christian Friends of Israel. Jeffrey, I really want to start off by talking to you, because you have really been a pioneer, haven't you, in terms of really reaching out to the Jewish community and being a pioneer, and really what's come of that relationship has blossomed for the Christian community and their relationship with the Jewish community.
Well, that's really been the Lord's favour in putting me in those places. But I well remember one earlier, Yom Ha'atzmaut, 25 years ago, Israel's 40th anniversary. I was at St. Mark's Church in Kennington in those days, and I think we were the only church in London that celebrated Israel's independence, 40 years of it. And the police were concerned in case there might be a terrorist attack. So there was a van load of police at the back of the church. But when people were coming in, one of our rather wayward parishioners arrived with two bags of drink, and he was a bit drunk, and when they tried to stop him, he drew a knife, and so the stewards called for me to come down, and Danny hit me with a haymaker of a punch, landed me flat out, and he and I had to go to the Horseferry Road Magistrates Court. So I suffered from Israel's 40th anniversary. But, it's been a tremendous privilege to be a witness to the miracle that God has done, to this extraordinary thing. Israel's restoration as a state 65 years ago is the most remarkable prophetic confirmation of the scriptures in our lifetime. It's something that the prophets long to see. It's something that we in our lifetime have had the privilege of seeing. It's an amazing thing, and to see what Israel has done for the world in blessing in these 65 years.
Absolutely. And Jeffrey, can we start? How did your journey start? I mean, how did the Lord really put a great love for Israel and the Jewish people on your heart? Because you've been an incredible ambassador and a spokesman on behalf of the Jewish community for Israel, and you're held in such high esteem by so many leaders in the Jewish community.
Well, it does for me actually go right back to that time when I was in the leadership team at St. Mark's, and my wife restarted a group praying for Israel there, and that night a young man, we got home, we took one of these intercessors back home to Pimlico, then we went home, and it was about midnight. There was a ring on the doorbell, and my wife went to the door, and this young man put his foot in the door and said, "Call Jeffrey." I was doing the washing up, and my wife called me, and then he drew a butcher's knife out of his coat, and he put the knife in my chest with one hand, and he held my wife by the throat with the other hand. And he asked me to give him the keys of the church safe. But I'd done the banking, the church safe was empty. He said, "Well, swear in the name of Jesus that you won't report me to the police." So I said, "Well, you've got no right to be here, and I'll decide what I do when you've gone." And he pushed the knife a bit, and anyway, in the end, he threatened that if we did call the police, he would. He had friends on the outside, and if he went to prison, we would be dead within a week. But he did go. He pushed us inside. He fled, and we did call the police. He did go to prison, but he did threaten us again after that, and we would have been really fearful of him. But then I was invited to go to Israel to take a post in Israel, and I knew that I should go. And this was 2 years after he had threatened us in our home. And it was a tough decision. It was a time when there were conflicts going on in the Middle East. But I said yes. I wrote the letter to say yes, and I got it ready to post. And then there was a phone call, and it was this same young man from 2 years back, and he was ringing to say that he had given his heart to the Lord Jesus on the top deck of a bus in Brixton High Street. Now, to me, that says something, that the very day, the night that Prayer for Israel began at our church, he attacked us in our home with a knife. And the very day, 2 years later, when I said yes to going to Jerusalem, his life was turned around. And I believe there's a special place God has for Jerusalem. And I do believe that miracles happen because of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my other guest is Keith Fraser from the Zionist Federation. It's going to be quite an easy interview compared to what you used to, particularly being on Press T with Ken Livingstone. But Keith, can you describe to our viewers how you became involved in Israel advocacy?
How did I become an Israel advocacy? Well, I guess I'm quite an outspoken sort of person, and I've always been an advocate for Israel. I'm Jewish. I feel that the Jewish people need a strong Israel. Israel needs a strong diaspora, and I believe it's my duty to carry the torch, carry the flames, and do my bit for Israel. The IDF in Israel, who protect the country militarily, I've got the hardest job. We've got a different type of job, and it's important that we rebut the lies and rebut the nonsense that's being spread about Israel and the Jewish people. And I feel that it's my duty to do that.
Excellent. And today you're representing the Zionist Federation, which is an incredible organisation that is really at the forefront of defending Israel and promoting Israel.
Absolutely. The Zionist Federation is the leading pro-Israel organisation in the UK. It is the one organisation that's been going before the State of Israel. It's been going since 1899, and in fact was part of the Balfour Declaration. Balfour wrote to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain to talk about the fact and express the fact that there was going to be a state of Israel for the Jewish people in British Mandate Palestine. And the Zionist Federation has carried on in its role as the preeminent pro-Israel organisation. It's involved in a number of things, whether that be organising events, whether that be lobbying for the State of Israel in Parliament, whether that be rebutting some of the lies in the media. It's at the forefront of everything that's to do with Zionism and Israel in the UK.
Excellent. And we've got a clip to go to now that looks at some of the excellent work being carried out by the Zionist Federation.
What I think the IOC have done is to bow to seeming pressure from Arab nations because it was Israeli athletes that were murdered.
I don't recognise Israel and I don't debate with Israelis.
We're sick fed up with this dirty little murderous nuclear-armed apartheid state.
There is a large campaign of delegitimization, of boycott, divestment, sanctions laid against Israel unfairly.
There's clearly a significant gap between the public image and the reality of Israel. The reality is really our greatest asset, and the challenge for us is to expose people to the reality of Israel, and that's one of the things that the Zionist Federation is committed to doing.
We work in Parliament, we work in the media, we work across cultural, academic and scientific platforms.
The ZF decided to start running Science Days because we know how much Israel has to offer in terms of innovation and science and technology, and we never hear these good stories in the British media. We decided that we would start making these stories happen ourselves.
She's famous for completing the London Marathon in 17 days in a bionic suit. And now Claire Lomas is meeting the man who made it all possible.
I was wondering how come the wheelchair is the only solution for paralyzed people. And then there was the help from the Israeli government. I could calculate and design the device. And this is how it was created.
It's amazing, the confidence it gives you to be your own height again. A lot of people are quite surprised when they say, where's the suit from? America, and you know it's from Israel.
I had very little idea about Israeli technology until today. It was very inspirational.
Now we see how it's like in other countries and the technology they make and stuff.
I was really surprised to see what kind of new innovations Israeli technology is coming. It's really good. It's helping humanity.
Very important for us to take speakers, Israeli films, cultural events onto campuses which we know are hotbeds of anti-Israel hostility. And what we try to do is paint a fair picture of Israel in these environments. The ZF is deeply committed to partnering with other organizations both within the Jewish community and outside the community. The lobby of Parliament, for example, could not be conducted if we did not have such a deep partnership with Christian Friends of Israel, who have activists all over the United Kingdom.
Nobody works harder than the ZF to reach out and support Israel through grassroots advocacy.
We offer these people training and encouragement to go out and get Israel's message across, and these same people are the ones who come out and demonstrate and stand up for Israel when no one else will.
Let's go now to Keith Fraser. He's a spokesman from the Zionist Federation.
Any justification to target civilians is immoral and is illegal.
We are gathering, together with thousands of people joining us by webcast, to remember the darkest moment in Olympic history.
I congratulate the Zionist Federation for bringing together groups of people to say, we want a 1 minute silence.
With growing hostility towards Israel, we at the ZF campaign tirelessly for Israel to get fair treatment in Parliament and in the media. We need your support to allow us to continue to do this vital work.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. Jeffrey, you're representing here Christian Friends of Israel, CFI, and I know that you've had very strong working relationship with the Zionist Federation. How did that develop, and how was it blossoming?
Well, I think it really began after I came back from Israel, from living for 3 years in Jerusalem with my wife. We came back, and there was a lady, an intercessor in Bury St Edmunds, a wonderful lady who had been really concerned for 6 or 7 years about the history of Bury St Edmunds, and the fact that back in the 1230s, the Jewish community there had really been robbed and massacred and driven out. It was an appalling history, and the more she prayed about it, the more she felt that unless something was done to say sorry, to express repentance, then there was no real hope for the church to make advance, that the church owed this to the Jewish people. And as I looked into the history, I too came to share this opinion and a burning sense of the injustice of what had happened, that the Jews had lent to the abbey the money to do the building, and then the abbot had preached a viciously anti-Semitic sermon on Good Friday, and then they had pursued the Jewish people, fleeing and lynched some in the street. Others had fled, and then they'd banned them from ever coming back to Bury St Edmunds. And actually what happened there had happened in a number of other towns. And I was invited up to Bury to speak about this, and when the church there caught the vision, at one extraordinary evening, she said to me, this intercessor, she said, "Jeffrey, what's happened here, I believe will go across the country and will reach the Queen." Now, I didn't really believe that seemed to me far-fetched and quite impossible. But in the following years, that actually did happen. And all the towns where the Jews have been persecuted in England, there were services of repentance. And this reached Parliament, and a petition by 10,000, signed by 10,000 Christians, asking the Queen to reverse to the rule that had been passed in the Privy Council in 1290 for the expulsion of the Jews. And when this was going to happen in Parliament, I went along to Alan Aziz, who was then the chief executive of the ZF. And he didn't believe, rather like me, he hadn't believed it was possible, but it did happen. And there was that a ceremony in the Moses Room where the Christians expressed their deep sorrow and sent a message to the Queen. And that was one of the messages that really lay behind the beginning of Holocaust Memorial Day, which Jack Straw put through the Parliament just after, in the new millennium. That really, I think the Jewish community understood that there were Christians who loved the God of Israel and loved Israel today as an expression of that realization of what the prophets had prophesied would happen. That what happened in 1948 with the restoration of the State of Israel was an extraordinary fulfillment of the prophetic scriptures, Isaiah and the others.
Absolutely. And Keith, how important is it? I mean, when we're looking at today, 2013, sadly we are witnessing an increase in anti-Semitism. It's even worse on the continent than it is here. We're seeing a rise of so many malicious anti-Israel organizations, and part of the whole program to delegitimize the State of Israel and the Jewish people. And we've also seen false and misleading media reports in our mainstream media coverage when it comes to Israel. But how important is it that there is this strong evangelical support for Israel and the Jewish people here in Britain?
Well, obviously Israel is the birthplace of Christianity, and so also you have to consider that Israel is the only country in that region that allows Christians the opportunity to pray freely. It allows Christians the opportunity for their holy sites to be kept in good order. I'm sure you probably realise, and I'm sure your viewers may or may not know, that prior to 1967, when Jerusalem was under Jordanian control, there was a lot of desecration of holy sites, Christian, Jewish, etc. So Israel is a very important place, not only for Jews, but it's very important for Christians. And I believe that Christians worldwide realise, and they go to Israel because they know that they are going to be welcomed, their holy sites are respected, the religion is respected, and Israel is a home for the Christian people as well as the Jewish people. So Israel is very, very important to all religions. And sadly, what gets misrepresented is, or not even reported in elements of the media, elements of the Arab world, is that Israel is the only country in the Middle East which allows the growth of Christianity. I believe there's now 10% of the population, or 10% I should say, of the Arab population in Israel are Christian. It's about 150,000 Christians in Israel. That's grown in the last 10, 20 years. So it's a thriving place for Christianity. It's a very, very important place for Christianity. So of course, it's very, very important that it continues to have very strong relations with Christianity and Christians worldwide.
Excellent. And Keith, also, we're here to talk about Israel's amazing achievements in 65 years of a short history. But we also got to remember when the State of Israel was born on the 15th of May 1948, it came after probably the darkest chapter in Jewish history, in which 6 million precious Jewish lives were murdered at the hands of the Nazis. And then we saw the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948. What is it like, what does it mean to you as a Jewish person to know that there is a homeland for the Jewish people?
It's interesting because I've been lucky enough in my lifetime to know that there's always been a refuge in the State of Israel as a Jew. I can't imagine what it would have been like before that, because I would have felt effectively a gypsy. If there was any persecution here, where would one go? I always say to people, if you're a child who's left home, you get a mortgage, whatever, let's say the bank decides to foreclose on your mortgage, where would you go? You would go home to mum and dad or to your guardians. Where would a Jew go if this country said, sorry, you've got to leave, or it became untenable to be here? Well, of course, the only place that we know for sure that would welcome us is Israel. So when you ask how important is Israel to me, did you ask that?
Yes,
to
absolutely.
Me?
Yes.
For me, it allows me to stand up as a human being to know that I'm safe. I'm safe here, and I have a tremendous amount of respect and love for my country of birth, which is Britain, England. But I also know, and I can feel confident to know, that if anything would happen, I also have my parents or family over there who will always welcome me in open arms in times of trouble.
Excellent. And we have a clip to go to now, and this looks at the historical birth of Israel. And just prior to that, in 15th of May 1948, in which Israel's first foreign minister, Abba Eban, is talking about how he came to be in Israel.
First arrival in the land of Israel was in a very strange context. It began, as most stories did, in the Second World War with Winston Churchill. The plan was that the British Army or the British intelligence would arm and finance and support the Haganah, in which hundreds of young Israelis would be taught how to blow up railways, how to destroy bridges, how to assassinate the German leaders. But if there was to be cooperation between the Haganah and the British, who was to be the link between them? Well, here was a British officer named the Major Eban, who could command equal confidence from the Zionist leadership and fidelity, of course, to his duty as a British officer.
I therefore left Cairo on a train from Cairo to Kantara to Rehovot. And I entered the land of Israel in a rhapsodical mood. When I came to Rehovot and I smelled the orange blossoms and I saw the Hebrew writing Rehovot on the signpost, I knew that I had entered Hebrew country for the first time. The Jewish underground resistance, the Palmach, had already been trained and financed by the British government, which in all other domains was an adversary of the Zionist movement, and hundreds, perhaps thousands of young Jews would be trained in guerrilla warfare. This Israeli generation belonged to a different world than that of their fathers. Their image of themselves was as clear as the summer sun and just as uncomplicated. From the beginning, the Jews of Palestine longed to fight the Nazis under their own flag. The Jews saw the Nazis as their most hated enemies. While the Arabs generally supported the Nazis. allegiance of the Arab nationalist and religious leader Hajj Amin al-Husseini of Jerusalem became blatant, there was a certain logic to it. Anwar Sadat explains.
It was very simple to us. Germany is the enemy of our enemy, England. So the enemy of our enemy is our friend.
In July 1942, soon after the Battle of Tobruk, the German tide in North Africa was reversed by the Battle of El Alamein. Without this British victory, the gas chambers and death camps would have sealed the fate of Palestine's Jews. The Battle of El Alamein lasted 12 days. The British had lost 13,500 men, but the Germans were in full retreat. The German dream of conquering Africa and thus opening the gate to the Middle East had been smashed. General Montgomery had crushed Hitler's armies.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. As you can see in that clip, those were the key events that occurred during World War II that led later on to the establishment of the State of Israel on the 15th of May 1948. Jeffrey, I really want to bring you in. I mean, as a Christian, what is the significance and the meaning behind the re-establishment of the State of Israel after 2,000 years of the Jewish people in exile after 2,000 years?
Well, to grasp that, you need to go right back. And you think Justin Martyr, now he was born in Shechem in about 100 AD. And he was born to pagan parents. And when he was about 30, he saw the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. And he actually became a Christian. But he, seeing the destruction of Jerusalem, he interpreted that to mean that God had finished with the Jews. And the Romans got rid of Jerusalem and they established what they called Aelia Capitolina. They wanted to wipe the name of Jerusalem off the face of the earth. And what Justin Martyr deduced was that God had finished with the Jews, and now he was doing something new with this Christian church. And really that idea took root from the first century and carried through for hundreds of years. Then in the 16th century, Christians began to rediscover the Hebrew texts of the scriptures and saw the promise that one day God would regather the Jewish people from exile and re-establish the nation of Israel. And right from the 16th century, there were those in the church who were looking forward to that time that would come when God would sovereignly regather Israel from north and south, from east and west, as the prophet Isaiah had promised, as the Psalms promised, and re-establish his people in Israel. And they waited. And, that is the significance. I remember some years ago, I was speaking at a church in Wales, and there was this lady there who said she remembered about the time of the First World War, and she was a little child of about 5 in this Welsh church in Cardiff. And there was this visiting preacher, and she spoke up because I'd spoken on the text from Isaiah 43, verse 5 and 6, about God regathering from the north and south and east and west, and saying there were Jews from 100 different nations who were regathered into this state of Israel. And she said, I'm so glad you've come to tell me, because when I was 5, this preacher leant over the pulpit and he was preaching from that same text, and he said, little girl, the time will come when God will regather Israel and restore the state. It won't happen in my lifetime, he said, but it will happen in yours. And she was a 5-year-old girl then. She was in her 80s when I met her. And she said, I'm so glad God brought you to Wales to tell us this has happened. And you see, that is the significance of it, that something for which which we've waited 2,000 years has happened, that Israel has been restored, re-established as the prophet said it would be. And it was a sovereign act of God to do it against all odds. And it's been, a blessing to the world as a result.
Absolutely. And Keith, when the Jewish state was established on the 15th of May, 1948, the very next day, when Israel declared independence, she was attacked by 5 Arab neighbours. No one gave Israel any chance of surviving, and yet Israel survived 5 major wars in her history and continues to be a source of light and inspiration to what is becoming a very dark and dangerous Middle East. Just my question to you really is, how significant is the fact that Israel has survived 65 years in a very, very hostile neighbourhood such as the Middle East?
I think it's all part of the overall miracle of the state of Israel, the modern day state of Israel, to be in an area where you are surrounded on your doorstep with very hostile neighbours wanting to completely eradicate you. And it's survived against all the odds. It's unbelievable. A betting shop, for example, wouldn't give you any odds going back to 1948 of Israel surviving. But here we are 65 years later, and it's going strong. And so it gives you hope for the future, what it's managed to achieve, what it's managed to overcome, to accomplish in the face of real struggle and threat from its neighbours and the world. It does give you hope for the future, because it's still on the doorstep of some very unstable, hostile neighbours who are vociferously anti-Semitic, anti-Western, and it's still surviving. It gives you hope, and it is a miracle. And so what does that say to me? It just says to me, it is a miracle. Miracles can happen, have shown to happen, just through the victories of the IDF in those wars, and hopefully going forward as it seeks its quest for peace.
I mean, looking back at Israeli history, it is quite fascinating, because the more you actually look at Israeli history, the deeper and deeper you go. And some of the amazing highlights for me, coming from historian background, is the fact of, was the War of Independence, in which Israel faced 5 Arab armies with virtually no weapons. The Six-Day War, which was a miracle in which Israel almost tripled in her size, including having Jerusalem back under Israeli sovereignty. The Entebbe raid of 1976, in which Israel rescued so many Israeli and Jewish hostages in Uganda. And then Operation Solomon, in which Israel rescued, or actually brought back, the entire Jewish population in Ethiopia to Israel in a matter of a couple of days. Looking back at some of Israel's achievements, what have been some of the highlights over the last 65 years that you remember vividly?
I don't believe we've got all day to film this programme. So there are numerous. It's military victories. It's military capability. Everyone says, oh, well, it's got America helping. In fact, Israel helps America develop some of its weaponry. The F-16s have been modified by the Israelis and improved. America goes to Israel for a number of inventions, whether it would be military, whether it would be medical, whether it would be IT. Have we got all day to talk about them? I mean, of course, I'm going to be very supportive, and any outsider looking at this programme would say, oh, well, you would say that. Well, okay, maybe I would say that, but the truth is, look down the list. Everyday things from the mobile phone. The mobile phone was, I think, invented in Israel. Motorola, the originator of the first mobile phone, I believe, was invented in Israel. Instant messenger, the USB port, just general things every day that we use were developed in Israel. Microsoft have an enormous research and development facilities in Israel. Google, even Apple now, I believe, have a big. They have a big representation in Israel. Israel has the second biggest IT industry in the world after Silicon Valley. It's incredible. The list of successes are amazing. I'm not just saying that because I am pro-Israel, because I'm pro-Jewish. All the people who want to boycott Israel, all the people who want to say, I don't want anything to do with that country. Well, they better stop using mobile phones. They better stop using their computers. They better stop using certain medical innovations, because if you want to boycott Israel, then you're going to have to boycott a number of things you use in your daily life. You're asking me what are the things that stand out for me? There's too many to say, I should say. All I can say is that come April, when it's 65 years, we should celebrate Israel's existence, but we should also celebrate its enormous successes, which are endless, in a 65-year history of overwhelming difficulty and hostility.
Jeffrey, what have been some of your highlights in Israel's short but an incredible 65 years of existence, or since the re-establishment of the State of Israel?
Well, there are many, but one sticks out in my mind. 2 or 3 years ago, 2010 I think it was, I met Yoel Margalit. Now, he was a teenager. He was 15 in 1948, and he came to Jerusalem in 48. He actually was born in Serbia in 1933, and when the Nazis overran Serbia, the Jews were rounded up in his community, and they were taken in 6 trains. He was the first 5 trains went straight to Auschwitz, and all the people on them were killed, exterminated. He was on the 6th train, and for some reason that got held up here and there, and he was in 2 concentration camps, Bergen-Belsen and Theresienstadt. He was the only child from his community to survive the Holocaust. He came to Israel 15 years old in 1948. He'd missed some education, so he went to night school to make up his education, but he went to work in the zoo, in Jerusalem Zoo, to earn money for his keep, to support him. And when he was called up, the army, I'm amazed at the army, given the difficulties of those times. They said the best thing he could do was to go to the Hebrew University and study mosquitoes. And, you know, there are thousands of different varieties of mosquitoes in the world, but there are 30 different varieties in Israel. By the time he was 20, he could tell those 30 different varieties apart without using a microscope. He became an expert in mosquitoes at a time when mosquitoes were causing enormous ravages right through the world. And he became known actually as Mr. Mosquito, because what happened, he was one day going down a dried up riverbed in the Negev when he came across lots of bodies of dead mosquitoes. He took them back to his laboratory, and he found it was a bacillus that had killed them. He called it BTI for short. It's Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis. It could have been named after him, but he named it after Israel, BTI. And he took that bacillus, and he took it to the Yangtze River Basin, he took it to West Africa, he took it to Latin America, and because of him, millions of people who would otherwise have died lived, because they were saved from malaria, they were saved from river blindness, because of the work of that one man, the one man who was the only child from his community to survive the Holocaust, and because of his life, millions of others have lived. You know, I mean, there are staggering achievements, but there was one I saw in the ZF clip. I saw this little, it's a tiny little pill, but I mean, that is an amazing achievement. You don't know if you know how it originated with, but it shows the heart of Israel for peace, and it began with the Popeye missile, 18 feet long. And when it was being demonstrated, a gastroenterologist said, look, if you could miniaturize that, it would be very helpful. And they said, well, maybe we could. And they reduced it from 18 feet into this little pill. Now, the point of the Popeye missile was that it's got a camera in the nose, and as it traverses the territory, it relays back to the controller the pictures of the terrain it's crossing. And this little pill, if you swallow it and you have a pack here, it relays to the pack here the pictures of your gut all the way down.
Wow.
And then the next day, the surgeon can take it, and without having to do anything invasive, he can see the whole of your intestine and find out where there's been any problem. That is Israeli ingenuity, and that is turning turning the swords into plowshares, turning a missile into a medical invention like that.
That's amazing. And we've got a clip to go to now that's entitled Israel Against All Odds, and it shows you some of the most amazing achievements achieved by the State of Israel in her 65 years of existence.
One of the smallest countries on Earth, with 1/1000th of the world's population, only 60 years old, under constant threat, and yet, relative to its population, Israel is the largest immigrant-absorbing nation on Earth. It has absorbed 350% of its population in 60 years. Israel is the only country in history to have revived an unspoken language. Since the founding of the state, Israel has more Nobel Prizes per capita than any other country. It has more laureates in real numbers than China, Mexico, and Spain. Israel has the 8th longest life expectancy, 80.7 years, longer than the UK, US, and Germany. Israeli films were nominated 3 years in a row for the Academy Award's Best Foreign Film. Israel is the only country that entered the 21st century with a net gain in its number of trees. Even more remarkable, in an area that's mainly desert. Over 90% of Israeli homes use solar energy for hot water, the highest percentage in the world. Israel's scientific research institutions are ranked 3rd in the world. Israel is ranked 2nd in space sciences. Israel produces more scientific papers per capita than any other nation by a large margin. Israel has the 3rd highest rate of entrepreneurship among women in the world. Israel has attracted the most venture capital investment per capita in the world, 30 times more than Europe. Israel leads the world in patents for medical equipment. Israel has more NASDAQ-listed companies than any country besides the US, more than all of Europe, India, China, and Japan combined. In proportion to its population, Israel has the largest number of startup companies in the world. In absolute numbers, Israel has more startups than any country other than the US. Israel is the only country whose indigenous population returned to its native land after 2,000 years of forced exile. There are 26 official Muslim states in the world and 18 official Christian states, but there is only one Jewish state.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. Keith, I'm so pleased we showed that clip. It just shows you what an incredible achievement the State of Israel has achieved, which is sadly not seen on so much of our mainstream media. Now, we know the Zionist Federation is celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is Israel's 65 years of independence. Can you explain what's going on with this celebration on, is it April the 12th, isn't it? Tuesday, April the 12th.
The actual date has escaped me.
Oh, so yes, the 16th, sorry. Tuesday, the 16th of April.
Right, okay. Well, it's going to be the biggest celebration of Israel's birthday that this country's ever seen. I think Europe's ever seen at Wembley Arena, I believe. And it will encompass a number of Israeli acts, a number of, shall we say, well, I would say neutral acts that anyone could enjoy. People like Alexandra Burke from the X Factor. There's a dance group who's been on Britain's Got Talent. So it's not just Israeli artists or Jewish artists, but it is to celebrate and be proud to celebrate Israel's 65th milestone birthday for Jew, for Christian, for whoever wants to join in and celebrate Israel's birthday, its achievements, and as we've seen by the clip, a number of its amazing innovations. It's a celebration of the country, of what it stands for, and what it's supposed to stand for, which is a light upon nations.
Absolutely. And this is a note from the Zionist Federation. They're actually giving away 4 free tickets as part of a family deals, and you can enter into a prize draw if you email office@zfuk.org, which is up on your screen now, with the title Revelation in the subject box, and you'll be entered into a free prize draw to actually win some tickets. So it's definitely worth doing. And Jeffrey, I know that you've been very much part of these Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations organised by the Zionist Federation, and they're an incredible spectacle to behold. And are you invited to this one?
There will be a number of people from Christian Friends of Israel going to it, as we have done year after year, and it's a great thing to partner with our Jewish friends and express our solidarity with them and our support for them as they celebrate together Israel's birthday.
Excellent. And we've got a quick taster for you now to see what the Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations that are going to be held at Wembley Arena this year.
I'm going back home to the place where I belong.
Lo lai lo lai, lo lai lo lai, lo lai lo lai, lo lai lo lai.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better way to actually celebrate Israel's 65th birthday than attending the Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations at Wembley Arena on Tuesday, the 16th of April. Keith, for some of our viewers who would love to attend this great gala fest celebrating Israel, how can they actually get more information?
Well, as your programme has been highlighting, most of the programmes, so I believe, I haven't been looking at the screen, if they go to the ZF website, it should take them, direct them to be able to book tickets to the gala event, which is at Wembley Arena. In fact, I'm looking forward to going. I think it's the only visit I'll be making to Wembley for a long time, as my football team hasn't been there for a while. So it will certainly be a great day. I think if you go to the ZF website, it would direct you straight on to book tickets, I would have thought, online.
Excellent. And Keith, I just want to show appreciation for you being here on representing the Zionist Federation, that representing the Jewish community, well, certainly representing the Christian community, that we're standing with you, that we're supporting with you. We know that there is a battle to communicate the truth regarding to Israel, and that we're fully engaged in that battle to actually fight for the truth and really stand up against anti-Semitism and really stand up for Israel. So thank you so much both for being my guests, and Jeffrey, thank you so much for all your pioneering work in strengthening relationship between the Jewish and the Christian community.
Thank you.
And just want to thank you all for watching this programme, and I think we have to look back and think of the amazing 65 years in which the modern state of Israel has existed, in which Israel has faced 5 major battles during that time. And yet Israel survived. Not only has she survived, but she's prospered, and the whole world is benefiting from her remarkable and amazing achievements. So let's continue to stand with Israel. Let's continue to stand with the Jewish people, and let's fight for truth and enjoy this song that looks at the amazing country that is Israel. She celebrates her 65th birthday.